Max sat in the living room, lazily flipping through TV channels while sipping on a beer. Olivia had left for work again. At least, that's what she had told him. Her night shifts had become a routine over the past few months. He didn't like it, but he had gotten used to it. She claimed she was handling administrative duties at the club, saying it was a chaotic place filled with drunk customers and staff issues. He believed her. Or at least he wanted to. Hey there. Before we start, let us know where you're watching from, if you subscribe to the channel, and if you've left a like. It really helps. Enjoy the story. Have you even seen your wife lately? Came the voice of Dylan, who was sprawled out on the couch, lazily twirling a beer bottle in his hand. What are you talking about? Max frowned, turning to his friend. Nothing. Dylan shrugged and took a sip. Just saying, she seems to spend more time at work than with you. Work is work, you know that? Max replied, brushing off. Dylan smirked and shook his head. Max, you know me. I don't like getting into people's business, but I've been telling you for a while now, something's off here. Max sighed. He'd heard these hints from Dylan before and always dismissed them as just his friend's usual skepticism. Dylan was a womanizer, a cynic who never believed in strong relationships or trust between people. You're getting on my nerves with your theories. Max waved him off and took another sip of beer. Can we drop it? Dylan was silent for a moment, turning the bottle in his hands. Then, taking a deep breath, he said, I booked a girl through an escort service. Max raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Dylan was always a bit of a wild one, so this wasn't exactly shocking. And Max asked calmly. Dylan ran a hand over his face as if preparing himself for what he was about to say, then blurted it out. It was Olivia. Silence filled the room. Max didn't immediately process what he had just heard. He turned his gaze toward Dylan, trying to make sense of the words. What kind of bullshit is that? I'm not joking, Max. Dylan looked him dead in the eye. I booked an escort through a reputable agency. When she walked into the room, I nearly fell out of my chair. It was Olivia. Max let out a short, dry laugh, but it sounded forced. You're insane. Olivia? No way. Your wife, Max. Dylan repeated slowly, emphasizing each word. Max felt his heart skip a beat. A cold, creeping unease started to settle inside him, but he pushed it away. You're mistaken. I thought so too. Dylan leaned forward, setting his bottle on the table. She wore a mask, but I recognize her voice, her movements, and she has a small birthmark on the right side of her neck. Max tensed up immediately. Are you sure? His voice turned ice cold. Dylan's expression was serious. I was drunk, but not that drunk. Max clenched his fists. His head buzzed. No, this couldn't be real. Olivia? His Olivia? Do you have proof? He asked through gritted teeth. Dylan reached for his phone. I didn't take any photos during the meeting, but I took a screenshot of her profile from the agency's website. Her face is partially covered, but you'll see for yourself. Max took the phone from Dylan. On the screen was a profile with the name Mila. The face was mostly obscured, but the birthmark on the neck, it was her. Something hot flared up in his chest. His hands balled into fists. I didn't know how to tell you, Dylan said cautiously, but you had to know. Max stood up. Where is she now? She's working somewhere, Dylan shrugged. The real question is, doing what? Max grabbed his jacket. I'll find out myself. Dylan didn't try to stop him. Max stepped out of the apartment, feeling his veins fill with ice-cold rage. Max sat on the couch, staring at his phone screen. He scrolled through the photo Dylan had shown him over and over again. The woman in the picture wore a mask, but he recognized a small birthmark on her neck, the same one he used to kiss so tenderly. He noticed a delicate gold bracelet with a tiny charm. He had given it to Olivia when their daughter was born. He forced himself to believe it was a mistake, a bizarre coincidence. Maybe Dylan had been too drunk. But why, then, did his stomach feel like it was twisting into knots? Why were his hands shaking? Why did his thoughts race like trapped animals? Max shut his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. You already know it's her. Dylan's voice broke the silence. Max slowly lifted his head. Dylan was watching him closely, his face a mix of sympathy and firm conviction. I need to see for myself, Max said quietly. How? Max didn't answer. He already knew how. That evening, he sat alone in his parked car, waiting outside the nightclub where Olivia worked. The neon sign cast a red glow onto pavement. People came and went, some laughing loudly, others barely able to stand. Max took a deep breath and dialed the number Dylan had given him. A polite female voice answered instantly. Good evening. How can I assist you? I need a girl for the night, Max said, keeping his voice steady. Do you have any specific preferences? He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm. Brunette, around 5'7", slim, but with nice curves. Brown eyes. Birthmark on the right side of her neck. The woman paused for a brief moment before responding smoothly. Yes, we have a few options that match your request. Does one of them wear a thin gold bracelet with charm? Another brief silence. Yes, we do have a match. Max felt his heartbeat slam against his ribs. I'll take her, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Where would you like to meet? He gave the name of a hotel and a room number. She'll be there in 2 hours, the woman confirmed. Max ended the call and clenched his fist so tightly his knuckles turned white. The hotel room was comfortable but felt suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on him, squeezing the air from his lungs. He stood in front of the large mirror above the dresser. His reflection looked calm, composed. But inside, he was burning with anger, pain, and something he didn't want to name, fear. Then, a soft knock at the door. Max closed his eyes, took a deep breath. His hand reached for the handle. Click. The door opened slowly. And there she was, Olivia. She wore an elegant black dress, her long hair perfectly styled, a hint of lipstick on her lips. She had the poised, confident look of a professional. But her eyes, they were empty. She stepped inside, hesitating for just a second. Max looked at her. She looked at him. And then in an instant her polished smile vanished. Max! The air between them grew thick, heavy. Close the door, he said, his voice low and controlled. Her face paled, but she obeyed, shutting the door behind her. For a few seconds, they just stood there, staring at each other. This isn't what you think, she stammered. Max let out a slow, humorless laugh, but there was no amusement in his eyes. Then tell me, what is this? Her hands trembled. It's just work. It's only for the money. It doesn't mean. For the money? His voice turned icy. So, you sleep with other men for money? She shook her head frantically. No, Max, I only meet them. It's just companionship, just talking. Talking? He stepped toward her, and she instinctively took a step back. Olivia swallowed hard. I was going to tell you. When? He barked. She flinched. When we paid off the debt. Max froze. Debt? She nodded quickly, her breathing uneven. We were struggling. I didn't want you to know. I had no choice. He clenched his jaw, stepping away from her, his fists tightening. And you decided the best way to fix our problems was this? It's not escorting. It is escorting, he exploded. She shrank back, her breath coming out in short gasps. Max ran a hand over his face and let out a bitter, humorless laugh. God. He shook his head. I can't even look at you. Olivia let out a quiet, broken sob. Max, please don't leave. He looked at her, his wife, the woman he trusted, the woman who betrayed him in the most disgusting way. I already left, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Inside, everything inside him felt like it had burned to ashes. Olivia stood frozen in the middle of the hotel room, staring at the closed door. Her breath hitched, her vision blurred. The moment she saw Max standing there, she knew. He knew everything. Her heart pounded violently. It felt like the ground had been ripped from under her feet. She took a shaky step forward, but her body refused to move properly. Max hadn't said much. He didn't have to. His eyes had spoken for him. Cold, unreadable, filled with something that terrified her. She tried to reach for the door, but her fingers trembled too much to grip the handle. "Max!" she whispered, though he was no longer there. He was gone. Max drove aimlessly through the city, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The streetlights blurred past him, but he barely noticed. His mind was too full of images. Olivia standing in that hotel room, looking at him like a deer caught in headlights. He had suspected it. Dylan's words had planted the first seed of doubt, but a part of him had still refused to believe it. Until now. Now, there was no doubt. His wife, his Olivia, was an escort. Max exhaled sharply and pulled over the side of the road. He leaned his head against the steering wheel, his breathing heavy, ragged. His entire marriage had been a lie. Had she ever loved him at all? Had she always been like this, or had something changed along the way? His phone vibrated in the passenger seat. He ignored it at first, but then saw the name on the screen. Olivia. His jaw clenched. The phone buzzed again. And again, a message popped up. "Max, please, I need to talk to you. Just once. Please." Another message. "I can explain everything." Then another. "I never meant to hurt you. I love you." Max let out a hollow laugh. Love? Before he could stop himself, his fingers tightened around the phone. He swiped to call her back. The line barely rang once before she picked up. "Max!" Olivia's voice was desperate. "Please, just listen to me." "Tell me the truth," he cut her off, his voice dangerously calm. A pause. The whole truth, Olivia." Silence stretched between them. He could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, fast and uneven. "I didn't sleep with anyone," she finally whispered. "I swear." Max closed his eyes. "Then what the hell were you doing in that hotel room?" "I was just meeting clients. Just having drinks, keeping them company. That's all." His grip on the phone tightened. "And the money?" Another pause. "It was good money, Max," she said, almost pleading. "We needed it. I did it for us." Max let out a bitter chuckle. "You keep saying that, but you never asked me. You never told me. You just decided. I was scared." Olivia's voice broke. "I didn't want you to know how bad things had gotten. I didn't want to lose you." Max exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You lost me the second you walked into that hotel room." Silence. "Max, please." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't do this. Don't just walk away. Let me fix this." He hesitated for only a second. Then his voice came out cold, detached. "There's nothing left to fix, Olivia." And he hung up. Max didn't go home that night. He didn't want to be anywhere near the house they had shared, the place that now felt tainted. Instead, he drove to Dylan's place. His friend opened the door with a cautious expression, holding a beer in one hand. "You look like hell, man," Dylan said. Max stepped inside without a word. "So?" Dylan asked after a moment. "What happened?" Max sat down on the couch and ran a hand over his face. "It was her," he admitted, his voice hollow. "Everything you said was true." Dylan sighed and dropped into the chair across from him. "I'm sorry, Max." Max scoffed. "For what?" "Telling me the truth." Dylan took a sip of his beer, watching his friend carefully. "You gonna leave her?" Max didn't answer right away. He stared at the floor, his mind a storm of emotions. "I don't know," he finally said. Dylan raised an eyebrow. "You don't know? After what she did?" Max sighed. "It's not that simple." Dylan scoffed. "The hell it isn't." Max exhaled heavily, leaning back against the couch. "I need time," he admitted. Dylan studied him for a moment before nodding. "All right," he said, "but don't let her mess with your head, man. Some things you just can't come back from." Max nodded, but he wasn't sure he believed that, because deep down, a small part of him still wanted to understand why. And that scared him more than anything. Max sat on the couch in Dylan's apartment, staring blankly at the ceiling. The city outside was still awake, cars passing by, distant sirens wailing, but inside, everything felt eerily quiet. His mind refused to settle, replaying the night's events over and over like a broken record. His wife. An escort. He let out a sharp breath and rubbed his face with both hands. His entire marriage felt like a joke now. How had he been so blind? Dylan walked back into the room, tossing another beer onto the table in front of Max before sitting down in the armchair across from him. You gonna tell her pack her shit and leave? Dylan asked, cracking open his own drink. Max exhaled slowly. I don't know yet. Dylan frowned. What's there to think about, man? She lied to you. She sold herself behind your back. What part of that leaves room for discussion? Max knew Dylan was right, but something inside him still hesitated. I need to hear everything, he admitted. If I walk away, I need to know why she did it. I need to understand. Dylan shook his head. You're making a mistake, Max. The more you listen to her, the more she'll twist the truth. Women like that, they know how to manipulate. Max clenched his jaw. She's not just some woman, Dylan. She's my wife. Dylan scoffed. Yeah? And what's a wife supposed to be? Someone who has your back. Someone who's loyal. Someone who doesn't sneak off at night to meet rich assholes in hotels. Face it, man, she's not your wife anymore. Max didn't respond, because deep down, he knew Dylan was right. He just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. The next evening, Max finally returned home. The house was dark, except for a dim light coming from the kitchen. He stepped inside, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle in his bones. The moment he closed the door, Olivia appeared in the hallway, as if she had been waiting for him. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She looked like a ghost of the woman he had once loved. Max, she whispered, please. He didn't say anything. He just stared at her, waiting. Can we talk? She pleaded. I swear I'll tell you everything. Max exhaled sharply and walked past her into the kitchen. Start talking, he said coldly. Olivia hesitated before stepping inside. She wrung her hands together, clearly struggling to find the right words. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said finally. I never wanted to lie to you. Max leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. Then why did you? She swallowed hard. Because I was desperate. You remember when I lost my job last year? We were barely keeping up with the mortgage. I applied for everything I could, but no one was hiring. And then a friend told me about this agency. Max's stomach churned. And you thought, hey, great idea. Let me just start meeting strangers for money. I didn't sleep with anyone, she blurted out. I swear to you, Max, it was just company. These men, most of them just wanted someone to talk to. Fancy dinners, drinks, nothing more. Max narrowed his eyes. Then why the secrecy? She looked away, shame flickering across her face. Because I knew you'd never accept it. And I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now. Max felt his fingers tighten into fists. How am I supposed to look at you, Olivia? Like the woman I married? The one I trusted? She flinched but didn't look away. I was trying to fix things, Max. For us. He let out a bitter laugh. No, Olivia, you weren't doing this for us. You were doing this for you. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I didn't want to lose you, she whispered. Max stared at her for a long moment. His emotions tangled in a mess of anger, betrayal, and something else he couldn't name. Finally, he spoke. You already did. And with that, he turned and walked out of the room. Max didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying every word Olivia had said. It was just company. I was doing it for us. I didn't want to lose you. Lies. Excuses. He wanted to believe her, but deep down, he knew better. At some point, exhaustion took over, and he drifted into a restless sleep. When he woke up, the house was eerily quiet. He got up, rubbed his face, and walked into the kitchen. Olivia was there, sitting at the table, a cup of untouched coffee in front of her. She looked up when he entered, her face tense. I know you don't believe me, she said quietly. Max didn't respond. He opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter. But I told you the truth, she continued. I never crossed that line. He scoffed. And I'm just supposed to take your word for it. She flinched. I have proof, she said hesitantly. That caught his attention. What proof? Olivia took out her phone and hesitated before unlocking it. Then, with shaking hands, she slid it across the table toward him. Max stared at the screen. It was an email exchange between her and the agency. Messages discussing the terms of her work. No intimacy. No physical contact. Strictly companionship. Max's jaw tightened. And I'm supposed to believe that all those men were really paying you just to sit and have drinks? Olivia looked away. Some of them tried to push for more, she admitted. But I never let it happen. Max studied her face. Then why didn't you tell me from the start? She let out a shaky breath. Because I was ashamed, Max. I knew you wouldn't approve. I knew you'd be disgusted. His fingers curled around the phone. Damn right, I'm disgusted, he muttered. Silence filled the room. Finally, Olivia spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you hate me? Max exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temples. I don't even know what I feel anymore. She swallowed hard. Can we fix this? Max stared at her, his emotions a chaotic storm inside him. Could they? Could he ever look at her the same way again? He wasn't sure, and that terrified him. Max sat in silence, staring at Olivia. The weight of her words pressed down on him like a heavy stone. Could they fix this? He wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the question. She had lied to him. She had chosen to go behind his back, to deceive him. And now, she wanted him to pretend it could all be undone with a few words? Olivia shifted in her seat, waiting for his answer. Max finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Her eyes filled with tears. Max, I swear I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was protecting us. Protecting us? He let out a bitter laugh. You think lying to me, sneaking around, and putting yourself in situations like that was protecting us? She flinched but didn't look away. I know I made mistakes, she whispered, but I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Max leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face. You don't get it, Olivia, he said tiredly. This isn't just about what you did. It's about what it means. She frowned. What do you mean? Max exhaled sharply and shook his head. It means that when things got tough, instead of talking to me, instead of trusting me, you went behind my back. It means you made a decision for me, without even giving me a choice. It means you were willing to let me live in a lie, because it was easier for you. Her lower lip trembled. I was scared, she admitted. Yeah. His jaw clenched. Well, I was blind. Silence. Max got up, pacing the kitchen. His head was pounding. His body felt like it was running on pure adrenaline. Yet at the same time, he was exhausted. Finally, he turned back to face her. Do you even regret it? Or are you just sorry you got caught? Olivia's face crumpled. Of course I regret it, she cried. Every second of it. I wake up every day wishing I had done things differently. Max studied her, searching for signs of deception. She looked devastated. But was that enough? I need space, he said, his voice hollow. Her eyes widened. No! Please, Max, don't shut me out. Let's talk. We did talk, he interrupted. And I need time. I need to figure out if I can even look at you without seeing this. Olivia covered her mouth with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Max grabbed his keys from the counter. Where are you going? She asked, her voice cracking. I don't know, he muttered. Anywhere but here. And with that, he walked out the door, slamming it behind him. Outside, the cold air hit him like a slap. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs, trying to clear his thoughts. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Dylan. How'd it go? Max didn't answer. He slipped his phone back into his jacket and kept walking. Right now, he didn't want advice. He didn't want pity. He just wanted to feel something other than this crushing emptiness. Max didn't know where he was going. He just walked. The cold air numbed his skin, but his thoughts kept burning like wildfire. Everything he had built with Olivia, everything he believed in, it was gone. Not just because of what she had done, but because of what it said about who she was. She had chosen this. Chosen deception over honesty. And now, she wanted him to just accept it? His phone buzzed again. Dylan. Max, man, where are you? Call me. Max ignored it. He wasn't ready to talk. Eventually, he found himself near a small diner, the kind that stayed open all night. Without thinking, he walked in and took a seat at the counter. A waitress approached, her name tag reading Lisa. You look like you need a strong coffee, she said, offering a small smile. Max nodded. Yeah, and maybe something stronger after that. She chuckled. Rough night. Max let out a tired sigh. Something like that. Lisa poured him a cup and left him alone. He wrapped his hands around the warm mug, staring into the dark liquid as if it held answers. He had no idea what to do. Was there even a way forward? Could he ever look at Olivia again and not feel this weight in his chest? He thought about everything she had said. I never slept with anyone. It was just for the money. I didn't want to lose you. But what did it matter? She had still betrayed him. She had still lied. Max took a sip of coffee, wincing at the bitterness. The truth was, he wasn't just angry at Olivia. He was angry at himself for not noticing sooner, for trusting her so blindly, for allowing himself to believe in a love that, apparently, had never been as strong as he thought. His thoughts were interrupted by another buzz. Olivia, I know you need space, but please come home. We need to talk. Max stared at the message, his heart pounding. Did he even want to talk anymore? Or was this the moment he finally walked away for good? Max sat in the diner, his phone resting on the counter in front of him, Olivia's message still glowing on the screen. Come home. We need to talk. He stared at the words, his mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. A part of him wanted to go back, to demand more answers, to see if there was anything left to salvage. But the other part, the part that was exhausted, betrayed, and done with all of it, that part wanted to let the message sit there, unanswered, forever. Lisa, the waitress, returned with a fresh pot of coffee. You keep staring at that phone like it's going to talk back to you, she remarked with a knowing smile. Max exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. Feels like it already has. Lisa arched a brow. Girlfriend trouble? Max let out a humorless chuckle. Wife trouble. She gave him a sympathetic look. Cheating? Max hesitated before answering. Something like that. Lisa nodded, as if she had heard this story 100 times before. Well, there are only two kinds of people in the world, she said, refilling his cup. The ones who screw you over and the ones who don't. Question is, which one is she? Max swallowed thickly, staring at the steam rising from his coffee. That was the real question, wasn't it? Was Olivia someone who had just made a mistake? Or was she someone who had chosen to betray him and only regretted it because she got caught? His fingers tightened around the mug. Maybe the answer didn't even matter anymore. He had seen the truth with his own eyes. He had felt it that night in the hotel, the way her face drained the color, the way she had tried to cover her tracks. If she had really loved him the way she claimed, she would have never put herself in that situation to begin with. Max sighed and picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen. He could reply. He could go home. Or he could walk away. For good. Lisa watched him for a moment, then smirked. Whatever you're thinking of doing, just do it. No use dragging out something that's already broken. Max met her gaze. She was right. Without another thought, he exited the message thread, deleted Olivia's number from his phone, and placed the device face down on the counter. Then, for the first time in a long time, he let out a deep breath. It was over, and he was finally free.